Tomorrow, my sister is coming over. She's pregnant, and just seeing you makes her feel sick, he said, voice sharp like a blade. He didn't look at me as he said it, just stood near the doorway, scrolling on his phone like I was background noise. Pack your things and go stay at my mom's while she's here. There was no hint of hesitation in his voice. No care, no concern for how those words might land. He might as well have been giving instructions to a delivery man. My heart didn't break. It had already fractured a long time ago. But something in that moment went still. I stood at the kitchen sink, hands wet, dish in mid-wash. My eyes didn't blink. I felt no tears welling up, no anger even, just a profound, cold silence within. Slowly, I turned to face him. "All right," I said softly. He didn't even raise his head. Then, I smiled. Not out of joy, not even sarcasm. It was the kind of smile that blooms when something painful finally becomes clear and irreversible. "Oh, I'll be leaving. Definitely leaving," I said calmly. That got his attention. His head lifted, brows furrowed slightly. For the first time in months, he actually looked at me, but not with love or concern, only confusion. And then I added, still smiling, "But not in the way you think." I walked past him slowly, drying my hands on a towel, the air heavy with something unspoken, something final. He said nothing more. Maybe he thought I was bluffing. Maybe he assumed I'd do what I always did, obey, shrink, disappear. But he didn't know that I had stopped being afraid. That somewhere along the months of his coldness, his criticism, and his family's subtle cruelty, something inside me had changed. I wasn't going to his mother's house. I wasn't going to play the obedient wife anymore. I was going to do what he never expected. I was going to leave, for good. And he wouldn't realize what that meant, until it was too late. Our wedding had been simple but beautiful. Ivory flowers, warm laughter, and promises whispered beneath a sunlit arch. I had looked at him with so much hope in my eyes, believing that I had found a partner, a protector, a man who would build a life with me, not around me. Back then, he had been attentive, even charming. Everyone said we were perfect. People envied how gently he held my hand during our first dance. But I've learned something since then. Appearances are master of deception. It started small. He would offer to handle certain things, the bills, the shopping, my calendar. He said he just wanted to take care of me, to make life easier. It felt sweet at first, but over time, what seemed like kindness became control. I stopped having access to certain accounts. He would raise an eyebrow if I stayed out too long. He insisted I leave my job when his promotion came. "We don't need the extra stress," he'd said. "You should rest, focus on the home." I was strong once, loud in my dreams, fierce in my passions. But little by little, I learned how to shrink myself in his presence. His silence became a punishment I feared more than yelling. And the worst part, I began to think it was normal. That love was meant to be endured, not lived. Then came his sister. From the beginning, she treated me like a guest in my own marriage. Fake smiles, subtle jabs. "You know, he used to date girls who were a bit more polished," she'd laugh. "But you're sweet, I guess." She'd come and go, always managing to create tension before slipping away with innocence on her lips and poison in her wake. He never defended me. If I raised my concerns, he'd sigh and say I was being sensitive. Always, he'd accuse me of trying to divide his family. And each time I swallowed my pride and stayed silent, a piece of me disappeared. Looking back now, I don't know what broke me more, the way he spoke to me, or the way he let others do it in front of him. Our marriage wasn't love. It was performance. And I was done acting. She had always been the kind of woman who made every room feel smaller when she entered, not because of her presence, but because of a need to dominate it. His sister, Layla, was the kind of person who craved attention the way lungs crave air. If it wasn't about her, it wasn't worth discussing. And from the very beginning, I was her favorite target. When we first met, she hugged me stiffly and said, "Oh, you're prettier than I expected." It was said with a smile, but the words stuck. I laughed it off back then, thinking maybe she was just awkward. But I quickly realized that every compliment from her came with a dagger tucked inside. She made it clear that she didn't think I was good enough for her brother. She constantly compared me to his exes, women she described as classy, ambitious, or well-bred. At family gatherings, she would find subtle ways to isolate me. Whispered jokes, inside references, sly glances exchanged with others. I always ended up sitting at the edge of the room, sipping tea, pretending I didn't feel the ice in her gaze. The worst part, she was clever, never loud, never obvious. If I confronted her, she would act shocked. "Oh no, I didn't mean it like that," she'd say sweetly. "You're just a little sensitive." There were incidents. Many. Like the time she accidentally spilled wine on the dress I was supposed to wear to his company's holiday party. Or the time she told everyone I was trying to keep her brother away from the family, simply because we had gone on a weekend getaway. She played the victim like it was her birthright. And every single time, he took her side. "I think you're reading too much into it. She's just going through a lot right now." She didn't mean it like that. It became a familiar pattern. She created the drama. I was told to be the bigger person. She cried crocodile tears. I swallowed mine in silence. One night, after she left in yet another whirlwind of chaos and crocodile apologies, I asked him plainly, "Why do you always believe her over me?" He didn't answer, just turned over in bed and pretended to sleep. That was when I realized, in his eyes, she would always be family. I was just the wife. To Layla, I was competition. To him, I was convenience. But I would not let either of them define my worth. Not anymore. It started with a whispered call late at night. I had gotten up for water, the hallway dimly lit, the house quiet. Too quiet, except for the soft murmur of his voice coming from the study. I paused by the door, heart thudding, and heard him say, "No, she's asleep. Don't worry. I'll handle it." His tone was low, intimate. When I opened the door, he jumped and hung up instantly. "Work stuff," he said quickly, avoiding my eyes. "You wouldn't understand." That was the beginning. After that, small things began to shift, like shadows crawling in places light used to live. He started locking his phone. He began working late, even on weekends, and coming home smelling different, like unfamiliar perfume and hotel soap. When I asked, he laughed it off. "You're being dramatic again." One day, while doing the laundry, I found a receipt in his jeans, a fancy restaurant. 2 dinners, expensive wine, and dessert. I hadn't been out to dinner with him in months. When I asked about it, he shrugged. A business client. It was nothing. But nothing began to show up in different forms. A hotel key card fell out of his coat pocket one morning. When I held it up silently, he snatched it from my hand and stormed off, calling me paranoid. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my heart aching with questions I wasn't brave enough to voice. Had it always been like this? Had I been blind? Or was I just too willing to explain away the red flags? He was no longer the man I married. There was a wall between us now, built of lies, secrecy, and cold distance. His touch had gone from tender to routine. His words were measured, hollow, and his eyes, they never lingered on me anymore. So I stopped asking questions, and I started watching. I checked phone bills. I took photos of receipts. I began writing everything down. Dates, times, things he said. I wasn't crazy. I just needed proof that I wasn't imagining the shift. That my gut wasn't lying. Because deep down, I already knew. There was someone else. And while he thought I was breaking, I was preparing. Not to confront him. Not yet. But to leave him on my terms. That night, after dinner passed in cold silence and the clinking of cutlery, I went upstairs and quietly began pulling out a suitcase, just like he asked. He didn't even glance in my direction. He was glued to his phone, half laughing at something on the screen, completely unmoved by what he had said to me just hours earlier. I moved around the room slowly, folding clothes and tucking things into neat stacks. But I wasn't packing for a temporary visit to his mother's house. I was preparing for something far more permanent. As I zipped the first compartment shut, I reached for my phone and stepped into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. My fingers moved quickly. The first call I made was to my older brother, Jamal. He lived an hour away, protective, fiercely loyal, and never fully trusted my husband. The moment I said, "I'm ready," he didn't even ask what I meant. He just said, "I'll come get you tomorrow morning." Next, I called Amani, my best friend since childhood. She had always been my sounding board, my truth teller. When I told her everything, the lies, the sister, the distance, she didn't gasp or cry. She just said, "Finally." Then I called a lawyer, a woman I'd researched quietly over the past 2 weeks. She answered on the third ring, calm and composed, and we scheduled a consultation for the very next day. I would bring the documents, the evidence, and every receipt I had collected. When I stepped out of the bathroom, he barely looked up from the couch. "You're packing, right?" he asked casually, flipping through channels. I smiled faintly. "Yeah, everything I need." He didn't notice that I had already taken my jewelry box, birth certificate, marriage documents, and a copy of the house deed from the drawer, tucked them neatly into my tote, hidden beneath a sweater. He didn't notice the way I slid my passport into the front of my suitcase, or the bank cards I had silently removed from the joint drawer we once shared. While he scrolled and smirked and sank deeper into his own arrogance, I was building an exit. Quiet, calculated, final. He thought I was packing to disappear for a few days. He had no idea I was leaving forever. The sky was still dark when I zipped my bag for the last time. The quiet hum of the ceiling fan, the soft ticking of the wall clock, everything felt still, like the world was holding its breath with me. I moved carefully, silently, not wanting to wake him. He was asleep, sprawled across the bed like a king in his castle, snoring lightly. The man who told me to leave, assuming I'd obey without question, now looked so small in the glow of the bedside lamp. I placed the letter on the dining table, right where he'd see it when he woke up. I didn't pour out my heart. I didn't beg. I didn't explain what he already knew deep down. It was short, calm, clear. "You asked me to leave, so I am. But not to where you expected. I'm not running. I'm reclaiming. Don't try to contact me. My lawyer will handle everything from here. This is goodbye." I slipped my wedding ring off and placed it on top of the folded note. I double-checked my tote bag. Copies of our financial records, his suspicious receipts, my ID, my passport, and the flash drive with all the files I'd gathered. Every piece of paper he thought I'd never be smart enough to keep, now in my possession. My jewelry box was tucked neatly into the side pocket of the suitcase. Not for vanity, for survival. At exactly 4:45 a.m., I walked out the front door. Jamal was waiting at the end of the street, parked with the engine off and headlights dimmed. I waved once, wheeled my suitcase to him, and got into the car without a word. He looked at me for a long moment, not with pity, but with pride. "You good?" he asked. I nodded. "Better than I've been in years." We drove in silence, the kind that wraps around you like safety. When we reached his house, Imani was already there, setting up the guest room with clean sheets and a kettle boiling in the kitchen. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't in survival mode. I was safe, supported, seen. My plan was in motion, and I wasn't going back. He woke up around 9, stretching lazily, expecting the smell of breakfast or the sound of dishes clinking in the kitchen. Instead, there was silence, a kind he wasn't used to. No movement, no humming, just stillness. At first, he didn't think much of it. Maybe she was sulking. Maybe she had left early for his mother's house like he told her. Good, less hassle for him. But as he stepped into the living room, something caught his eye. A folded piece of paper sat on the dining table, his name written across the front. He opened it slowly, confusion twisting into a frown with every word he read. The calm tone of the letter was the first red flag. She wasn't angry. She wasn't emotional. She was done. By the time he reached the end of the note and saw the ring beside it, his breath caught. The silence suddenly felt deafening. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. He rushed upstairs, checked the closet. Her suitcase was gone. Her tote was gone. Then he opened the drawer where they kept important documents, and his stomach dropped. Bank files, gone. Marriage papers, gone. Even the little black notebook he thought she never noticed, missing. Panic clamped down on his chest like a vice. He grabbed his phone and dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. He called again. And again. Nothing. He opened her location tracker. Disabled. By now, his hands were shaking. He called his sister. No answer. He paced the room, staring at the front door as if she'd walk through it at any moment and say it was all a joke, that she just needed space. But deep down, he knew. She was gone. And this time, she wasn't coming back. Not for an apology. Not for a fight. Not even for closure. She had walked out and taken back everything he thought he controlled. And now, for the first time in years, he realized he was alone. By noon that same day, the first blow landed. A formal email from a law firm landed in his inbox with the subject line, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage." He clicked on it with trembling fingers, eyes scanning through the neatly written paragraphs. Her lawyer had wasted no time. The words were sharp, clinical, and irrefutable. Emotional abuse, marital neglect, mental cruelty. She wasn't accusing blindly. She had dates, receipts, patents, proof. The kind of case that didn't just end in divorce, it ended with consequences.
By 2 p.m., the second blow hit. The joint bank accounts were frozen. He tried to transfer money for his weekend plans, and the transaction failed. He checked the balance. Access denied. His card declined. His voice cracked as he shouted into the phone with a bank representative, but the answer was clear. Per legal instruction, your shared accounts have been temporarily restricted pending separation proceedings. She had planned this. Carefully. Quietly. And now every thread he thought he had control over was slipping from his grasp. He called her again. Voicemail. He texted her. Nothing. Then, his mother called. She just served you divorce papers. Her voice rang with disbelief. What did you do? I didn't do anything, he snapped, pacing the floor. But even as the words left his mouth, they sounded hollow. Not long after, his sister barged into the house, flustered, waving her phone. She posted nothing online, but people are talking. Jamal's wife hinted something on Facebook. Everyone's whispering. What the hell is going on? He stared at her, the silence suddenly heavy with truth neither of them wanted to speak. Their plan, to isolate her, push her into submission, make her feel like an outsider, had backfired spectacularly. Instead of crumbling, she had strategized. She had moved first. Quietly. With dignity. With strength. Now, he was left in the ruins of a marriage he had taken for granted, not just abandoned, but dismantled with precision. For the first time, his mother and sister had no advice, no snide comments, no backup plans. Only shock. Only silence. And for the first time, they were the ones left out. The truth came out faster than anyone expected. It started as a whisper, an offhand comment made by someone at a family gathering. Layla doesn't even look pregnant, one aunt muttered. How far along is she again? The question lingered in the air, unanswered. Layla shifted in her seat and laughed it off, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. It didn't take long for the cracks to widen. A cousin, curious and unconvinced, asked about the doctor. The due date. The sonogram. Layla stammered, dodged, changed the topic. The more she tried to pretend, the more obvious it became. There was no baby. The final blow came when an old friend, someone who worked at the clinic Layla claimed to visit, casually mentioned over tea, "She's never been here for prenatal anything." Not once. It spread like wildfire. Whispers became accusations. Accusations turned into family outrage. And in the center of it all stood Layla, exposed, humiliated, and suddenly very, very alone. Her own mother confronted her first. "You lied," she asked, eyes wide with disbelief. "You used a fake pregnancy to drive your brother's wife out?" Layla broke down then, tears and half-truths tumbling out. She didn't belong here. He was changing because of her. I wanted things to go back to the way they were. But no one sympathized. Not this time. What was once passive support turned to pointed silence. She wasn't the victim anymore. She had schemed. Manipulated. Lied. And the woman she tried to push out had walked away with her head held high while Layla stood surrounded by the rubble of her own deceit. No one trusted her now. Not even him. Especially not him. At first, he thought he could keep it quiet, that no one needed to know the full story. But whispers have a way of becoming echoes, and echoes eventually become judgment. The divorce papers weren't just legal documents, they were a mirror. And people were looking. Friends who once admired his confidence began to look at him differently. Colleagues at work noticed the shift in tone, the jokes stopped, the invitations slowed, the conversations grew shorter. Everyone had heard bits and pieces, and together, they painted a clear picture. He wasn't the victim. At the barbershop, where he was once the loudest voice in the room, now no one asked for his opinion. At community events, people nodded politely but didn't linger. Even his boss, a man who once praised his leadership, began assigning key projects elsewhere. And Layla's exposed lie only made things worse. People now saw what they hadn't before: the silence of his wife, the tired smile she wore, the way she always stood just behind him. They remembered the way she disappeared from events, how she never spoke much unless spoken to, and how often he brushed her off like she was a shadow. The charm he once wore like armor had rusted. Alone in the quiet of his house, the emptiness was loud. The fridge still had her sticky notes, but none of the warmth. Her slippers were gone. The couch was too big. The bed too cold. He tried calling her one last time. Blocked. He sat in the same spot where she once folded laundry while humming softly, where she once offered him tea without asking. And for the first time, he truly realized. She had never been a burden. She had been a blessing he buried. And now she was gone. Not lost. But finally, found. The apartment wasn't grand. It had creaky floors and second-hand furniture. But it was hers. Every piece in that small space, from the soft beige curtains to the single potted plant on the windowsill, had been chosen with care. Not with compromise. Not with someone else's permission. With freedom. For the first time in years, she breathed without waiting for someone to question her exhale. The first few weeks were quiet, but not empty. She unpacked slowly, letting each object reclaim meaning. Her laptop, once closed more often than not, now sat open beside a cup of coffee as she typed away into the early hours. She'd picked up freelance writing projects, her words finally her own. Her voice, once silenced, now traveled into homes across the country through articles on resilience, healing, and starting over. Work flowed. So did peace. With her schedule now her own, she reconnected with the family she had once drifted from, not out of choice, but exhaustion. Sunday dinners with Jamal and his wife became a tradition. Her nieces and nephews filled her weekends with laughter and untamed joy. Her phone buzzed with love instead of tension. And then came the message from a woman she barely knew. I read your piece about leaving quietly. It felt like you were writing about me. Can we talk? It was the first of many. Soon, she found herself mentoring women, some still in unhappy marriages, some freshly escaped, and others too scared to even say the words I want out. She didn't give them all the answers. She didn't pretend to have it figured out. But she listened. She shared. And they healed, together. Her strength, once buried under duty and shame, had become something visible, radiant. People saw her now, not as his ex-wife, but as a woman who had rebuilt herself from the ashes of silence. She no longer flinched at loud voices. She no longer second-guessed her choices. The woman who once asked for permission to exist now owned every step she took. There were still hard days, memories that crept in, grief that whispered in corners. But even those had softened. One rainy afternoon, she sat by her apartment window, watching the water streak down the glass. A gentle calm settled over her. No more walking on eggshells. No more shrinking herself to be tolerated. She had traded survival for serenity. Obedience for ownership. Loneliness for love, the kind that began within. And as she sipped her tea and returned to her open laptop, she smiled. She didn't just leave a house. She reclaimed a home inside herself. Months had passed. The seasons had changed, the leaves had fallen, and still he hadn't heard from her. Not a call. Not a message. Not even a rumor. She had vanished from his life as if she had never been there, and yet, her absence filled every corner of the house. Then one morning, as he sorted through a small pile of mail, He saw it. A cream-colored envelope. No return address. Just his name written in her unmistakable handwriting. His hands trembled as he opened it. I'm not writing to reopen anything. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not waiting for an apology. I just wanted to say, thank you. Thank you for making me invisible because I had to fight to see myself again. Thank you for silencing me because I learned how loud my truth could be. Thank you for choosing her, time and time again, because it taught me never to come second to anyone, especially myself. Your house was never my home. It was a place I tried to belong in, but walls don't love back. Now, I live in a space filled with warmth, with light, with laughter that's mine. I write, I create, I sleep peacefully. And I've never felt more alive. You didn't break me. You released me. He read the letter once. Then again. And again. It was not cruel. Not bitter. It held no venom, no blame. Just truth. Quiet, dignified, and piercing. He sank into the chair at the table where she once left love notes beside his coffee. And finally, at the very end, came the line that stayed with him long after he folded the letter shut. You asked me to leave your house, so I found my home in myself.